it's actually more dramatic as.
All right. So Jim was here and he stepped out, and so now we're supposed to fill in for him.
Are we live now?
We're live.
Oh,
We're live.
Yeah, the show is starting.
Hello, DTLT. Today, Jim will be
Countdown.
joining us in a moment.
Yeah.
As usual, he needs to make an entrance.
But anyway, premise for the show.
Today, we are going to be and a warning as well, because if you don't like spoilers, and you choose to remain within the safe bubble of the Summer of Oblivion, you may not want to hear what we're about to reveal.
It's true.
It's going to be the dark underbelly.
What are we going to reveal? I mean,
of SOB.
what is there to reveal?
To the
Sort of
people
like the
who believed everything. I mean,
What do you mean?
whatever could I possibly mean? No.
Today, we're going to disabuse Andy of his belief that
That's not even the right mustache.
that's terrible.
That's awful.
That's all I got. Wait, I didn't exactly prepare for this.
Well, hello, Dr. Oblivion.
Well, Doctor, thank you for joining us.
It's good to be on the show.
My wife is calling.
She
to
wants
be
to
on
be
the
on
show.
TV.
She does.
Why start going during the...
So, what do we want to talk about with regards to
Well, I think
Summer of Oblivion?
one of the big things that people probably want to know is why Dr. Oblivion disappeared, like how that occurred. That it seemed like the course was for 3 days or so going, I don't know what you would call normal, but you know, how
Dr.
you,
Oblivion did not disappear.
how
He's
it
getting
just-
into character.
Stop! Don't do that.
we can't take it for 5 seconds, much less the whole 15
No, really.
minutes. Damn it. But then all of a sudden, Dr. Oblivion disappears, and then from that point on, it would just seem to be like chaotic narrative. So
Well, I'll
what
tell my
happened
part
with
of the
that?
story, and then
You
Martha was
gotta
there.
lean in a little bit.
I'll
here.
tell my part of the story, and then I'll let Martha fill in the details. Because I only remember one partial way, but it may be totally different. So, day 3, doing Dr. Oblivion. This is like the 3rd hour. I've done hour shows for 3 hours. By day 3, I was so burnt on Oblivion. He was boring me. The whole concept seemed to be lost. And when the show was done, and Shannon and Lee were here kind of helping, taking the Twitter questions and stuff, and Martha was watching along, and I got up, and I was like, it was a fucking nightmare. I hated this show. I hated the whole way it went. I'm done with this. And then, like, Martha and Lee were like, what? It went all right, although I wasn't convinced. They were like, yeah, we think it went all right. I was like, no, it's not. And then Martha was like, we got to think about what you're trying to do here. Like, what are you trying to... And so it was through them and their kind of ideas like, look, don't kill it yet. Because I was going to go right back to Jim Groom and say, okay, that was a little kind of joke I played. Now let's get to the class. But then we said, no, there's got to be some backstory to Dr. Oblivion. And that's when it hit us that next morning that Dr. Oblivion goes missing.
No, that's not what happened.
Okay. So, let's get to what happened.
Yeah, you weren't far into that
Okay,
Let's get the real
So-
story from Martha.
What happened was, so he was really depressed, and we started talking, and we said, well, you need to find ways to maybe get other voices on the show. because
Actually,
it
he was on a
feeling-
ledge, wasn't he?
Yeah, that ledge right there. He was up on the roof. The roofers.
That's right.
Spreading tar. No, and we said, you know, we need to get some other voices because it was it was a monologue. It was
That's
like,
right.
oh, the only voice that was really there was Dr. Oblivion, and even Skyping people in, it just felt like there was no dynamic nature to it. So we talked about ways to maybe at least get Jim on it for a couple days, and we said, well,
Yeah.
what if Dr. Oblivion gets sick? And we
That's
said,
right.
okay, well, Dr. Oblivion's going to get sick, and at that point we said, well. Lee had been wanting to get on the show, and it was
That's
like,
right.
maybe we'll have Lee dress up and pretend to be Dr. Oblivion's daughter, and she'll come
Bianca.
on and say, Bianca, and say, you know, Dr. Oblivion can't be here today, I'm really sorry, but Jim's gonna, you know, I feel confident about Jim teaching the class. And then, overnight, somebody, who was it, produced that spider, remember the spider video? Of that crazy spider in the web?
Do we know?
That
With
was,
the
yeah.
weird-
It was Swaffham.
It was Swaffham,
Yeah.
right, who
was
been...
played by Todd Conway.
Right, because Todd Conway, who had been from day one pretending
To
to
be
be the
Dr.
real Dr.
Oblivion.
Oblivion, challenging your character,
That was awesome.
put out this video with this weird sound. So we're in here and we're getting ready to do the show.
And that wasn't prompted at all by you all.
Nobody,
that took
no.
you off.
He just
He
did
was
that.
right on it. And so much
and
so,
it was
I was
bizarre.
like, what's going on?
Yeah,
with
we weren't
Dr.
really
Oblivion?
sure, because at that point we didn't even know who it was.
That's right.
And so I had said I wanted to speed up the sound and see if we could hear what he was saying.
That's
and I'm
right.
sitting at my desk and I sped it up, and you and I were listening to it, and all of a sudden you go, Dr. Oblivion's going to go missing. And
Right.
that was like 20 minutes before the show.
And
it
then
was
we
like,
put it all
okay.
together.
And then you were like, and we're doing the first visual design assignment. The first assignment will be create a missing poster for
For
Dr.
Dr.
Oblivion.
Oblivion.
So it really wasn't
right.
planned even more than half an hour, 20 minutes before the show. Like we knew there was going to be a
right.
change that day, but we didn't know it was going to be that until the last minute.
And it's that kind of structure that Martha described. She has a much better memory than me. That structure that actually now dedicated or dictated the next 4 weeks of the class. You come in that morning, what are we going to do? Is Bianca in this? Is she not? And then how we're going to go. With a very kind of no structure to it at all, except for that we knew we were going to talk about it and come up with something to do within the next hour or so.
And constantly reacting to whatever the community was throwing back at us.
Yeah.
Right,
Because
because like the DS-107, that whole break off, that was also unplanned.
Absolutely.
totally
most part.
spontaneous.
So you came up with a term that I think is a good term
Well-
to talk about DS-106, the Summer of Oblivion, is this idea of the emergent alternative reality.
Yeah, and I don't think I came up with it. I just, we hear people talking about emergent gaming all
Yeah.
the time and, what that means. And to me, this is like a fantastic example of at least the emergent ARG, because I think a lot of people maybe watching from the outside
Yeah.
thought that there was a little bit more of a roadmap
Yeah.
to your class, but it was
I
completely
I don't know if they were convinced of that or not.
Maybe not, yeah.
Yeah.
Although Downs did
It was
suggest it in his post.
in his post the other day that this was sort of a planned
Right.
phenomenon, but the ARG piece of it wasn't planned at
Not
all.
at
I mean,
all.
Beyond there being this character that you were going to play.
We just knew that there was going to be a Dr. Oblivion. I mean, the thing I wanted to do right away is I wanted to get this idea of a kind of fake professor and kind of make fun of this idea of the professional in front of the class, kind of monologuing. But I didn't have anything thought of beyond that. And it wasn't until Martha and Lee were like, hey, this is, there is more you can do. Backstory to Dr.
Right.
Oblivion that we really started to open up. But then that's when the whole thing just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like
And
the
a,
actual
and a beautiful
doing it.
riff on that was when Andy came on to do the video assignment, and it just took the whole Dr. Oblivion thing to the next level, because while he was doing that assignment, you were talking with a PowerPoint, and you were just very monologue,
right.
going through things, and people were like, "Oh, this is
They were
bullshit."
They hated him.
They
hated
hated it, and they were just railing against you.
People
and
like
then
I
as you
think
became
Alan
Dr.
started
Oblivion,
like a
it was
Google
like,
Plus hangout to
That's
talk about
right.
how much they hated you.
Right.
And,
That was kind of just my little homage to the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
with
That's right.
to me, it was watching this unfold from my seat over there and watching you guys talk about it and scheme about it and having what's coming next. It's just as entertaining being in the office as it is being out in television land watching.
and that
this
one
stuff.
more so than any of the other narrative, I think, fooled more people. I think
Yeah.
there were some that were
That's
fooled
right.
by the whole thing
Yeah.
because it was internet and it was online.
Yeah.
But I think even folks who had been coming in here to the office and knew that it wasn't real, they really thought that like you were deadpan serious. This was how you were going to do it.
well, what's interesting is that that's actually how Andy teaches that unit, even when he's not pretending to be Dr. Oblivion.
Well, it's
so it
also-
wasn't that much of a stretch.
Wasn't the first cut and
I
then
wondered how long it would take to get to that spot.
wasn't the first cut when you had your
give you
mustache
the
on?
benefit of the doubt.
Like it came back and then you had a mustache? Is that the first thing?
Well, that was the other thing that I really I wasn't prepared for, is that stuff, and I completely could commiserate with you after that, because that stuff is really hard.
Yeah.
Try to get your thoughts around simply just even doing your thing, doing your presentation is in and of itself hard, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But then to try to plan out, when I'm going to put on the mustache and when I'm going to put on the hairpiece and how to transition
pretending to be ill.
Well, and how to transition to the glasses where I couldn't see through
Yeah.
your glasses versus mine, and
You
put on my
really-
contacts.
You really start to realize how episode writers in television shows how hard it is for
Oh,
1
yeah.
hour, just how much content you need to fit in and make work, and then to keep track of the whole narrative in your head. I mean, we could never have kept track of everything, and it was just
Yeah.
sort of on the fly. Well, what about this? Oh no, that happened last week, and we can't change that up because this person's related to that, and remember that person's dead. And
That's right.
And it
Yeah.
really
Keeping track of
reminded
it
me
all.
actually of when I'll try and tell people what's happening on a soap opera. I would try and tell
Right.
people the story of
Yeah.
Dr. Oblivion, and they'd be like, "What are you talking
Yeah.
about?"
Love that.
trying to explain
But
it
I
to my
also
wife
You have
too.
to
It's the
watch
same
it,
thing.
yeah.
But I also think things that people created, like Michael Branson Smith was doing those Storefies.
Those were
What an
awesome.
amazing artifact of the entire experience, because I know in another 6 months
Oh, and
it'll
Alan-
be
Mm-hmm.
almost impossible to recall.
And Alan and Liddell's
Absolutely.
News
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
March, that stuff.
News on the
March
was
I'll always
amazing.
think of that stuff and just
And the way that emerged, not out of a video assignment, but as a way to chronicle the narrative of the class, because I think we can all agree part of the idea behind Summer of Oblivion, Dr. Oblivion, and it was emergent, was we wanted to actually engage in narrative while we were teaching a class about narrative, and that was the whole point. And I think to some degrees it worked, and it's kind of making me itch to get into your DS-106 this coming semester and come up with some sort of plan that we can actually every day or every other day work on a narrative
Some
and
piece
build
of a
it out.
story. And it's just like this meta story that becomes sort of the engine behind the entire class. Now, what about those students, though, who fought against the narrative or who were not compelled by it, or particularly credit-seeking students at Mary Washington?
Yeah.
Well, that's when we were talking about the MOOCs in general. You know, again, there's the students who just aren't comfortable with that stuff, and how do you deal with that? And I still don't know how you deal with that.
I mean, the thing is, it's a digital storytelling class. If you're not comfortable working yourself through the process of telling stories in a digital form, that the whole purpose of this class is jump in the water and start swimming, and we're going to make you swim.
Not just, I mean, in terms of that, it wasn't even just consuming a story in a digital form, like being a reader of a digital story. That's what we were really asking them to do. And being a reader of a digital story is so different from reading, you know, text-based narrative. And to me, what a wonderful, like, rich, marvelous opportunity. And to have students who were like, well, I just want you to tell me what I have to do to get an A.
Well, that's exactly what we're fighting against.
Yeah.
You know, and so I don't have any problem, and I don't think we've had any real casualties based that those students are going to be those students no matter what we do.
Right.
So in general, I mean, how do you get a student prepared with kind of a non-traditional approach?
Like,
to
I'm wondering,
to a
like,
class?
if we do this in the fall, do we go into it with a little bit more heads up for students?
I say we go even crazier. Like, I mean, I do. I say, like, the emails already start the story, and encrypted in those stories are, if you can't hack it, drop it.
Yeah.
And if you can, and then for like trailers of stuff that's to come.
Right.
Like, so if DS-106, and I hope they announce it soon, we can get some information out to those students right away. Like, if you're going
you better be prepared.
And that's what we did, I think, for the summer of Oblivion, both of us.
Yeah. Right.
And, you know, I couldn't have really made it clearer that if you don't want an experimental class that's going to push you on every level, don't take
This
it.
isn't the right class for you.
I guess I think what's funny about that is that they don't know you necessarily, but they didn't take it seriously. Like, they thought, well, you know, this is, I don't care what he says, this is going to be an easy course. I'm going to do the little bits of work to get this done, and I'll get my grade.
Then I drop the hammer.
Well, I think that's probably just typical of a student, especially one who's taking it over the summer, just sort of like, well, I'll push through no matter what it is. I don't care. Yeah, you warn me that it's hard, or you warn me that it's going to be a lot of stuff, but you know, I'll just do it. You're probably not going to have a lot of students that are going to be willing to drop it and find something else, because that means you've missed the whole registration period. You're going to have to find classes that no one else wanted anyway, whereas they got into DS-106, and it's a popular course. It's meeting gen ed requirements, and so I think for a lot of them, they're like, no, I'm in this now. I'll do it, and I'll just figure it out. And I think a lot of people don't realize, you know, they're not in it for life.
And on top of that, they're not in it for life. And on top of that, a lot of people, like we saw Martha with a few, it's like, they use complaining as their way to define who they were in that class.
Right.
Yeah.
And what can you do about that? I mean, that's that.
Yeah.
So
I am hopeful that with the fall semester, that because it's going to be a longer
more sustained
period,
narrative.
It's a longer period of time. There's more time to build it up. There's more time to spend with the students. 5 weeks was just so hard in the summer to get everything. And I mean, I was gone on vacation for 2 weeks, and I felt like I had missed almost the entire class just to catch up.
And in another show, because I know we're running out of time with this show, I think we should bring in Michael Branson-Smith and hopefully Cheryl Collin and talk to them about how they can teach their courses at CUNY and at Arizona and start triangulating the story.
Yeah.
And bringing it, you know,
Well,
I love the whole idea of,
like,
like,
an
different...
apocalyptic story
That'd be awesome.
where we've got, like, groups of students in different parts of the country who are living through a...
And I love the idea of, like, these TV live broadcasts, like, you know, newsrooms.
Right.
Like one in New York.
Right.
Go back to New York.
Yeah.
And in Virginia, what's happening? And we could have a little set there. And then in Arizona, you know. And each of us could play off of our particular conditions and where we are.
Any comments from our fans?
Dr. Garcia says, big difference between fighting against learners who are struggling and fighting against students who want the grade. And that's
right.
That's the truth right there.
That's big.
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with learners who are struggling. That's different.
Yeah, and they usually don't get penalized for struggling when
well,
they're learning.
Struggling is part of the
had
process.
some, and I was worried about particular students when we did start this, whether they would get it. And then, boy, what a turnaround.
Yeah.
You know, they really just, there's some spark happened, and they took off with it, and they did tremendous work.
Yeah.
And I think you always got to focus on the difficulties. But overall, out of the 24 students who took Summer Oblivion, and this was really a big, they 18, 19 said they loved it.
Yeah.
Like it was, unbelievable experience. So.
Well, either tomorrow or sometime next week, we're going to get together and talk about what our plans are for the fall, some ideas that we've got going on. So
That's right.
stay tuned for that. Otherwise, we're done for today.
And I'll see you guys in more than a week because I'm going to Outer Banks. So suck it.
Aren't you Skyping from the beach?
Nope. I'm out.
He's not for life.
I'm for life. I
See you,
invented
folks.
DTLT.